It's Wednesday, the 27th of August. Welcome to the President's Daily Brief. I'm Mike Baker, your eyes and ears on the world stage. And yes, you're correct, I'm still on the road. All right, let's get briefed. First up, President Trump continues to flex U.S. naval power in the Caribbean, sending both a cruiser and a nuclear-powered submarine to Venezuela's doorstep. We'll have those details. Later in the show, a controversial decision from the White House, as President Trump says he'll double the number of Chinese students allowed to study in the U.S., even as tensions with Beijing remain high. Plus, behind closed doors, Israel's top general pushes for a Gaza hostage deal, warning that the window of opportunity may not stay open. And in today's back of the brief, a homicide in Washington, D.C. ends a rare 2-week streak without a single killing in the nation's capital. It's admittedly a rather strange metric. Look at us, no murders for 2 weeks. But first, today's PDB Spotlight. We're beginning to learn more about the naval flotilla that President Trump has deployed to Latin American waters to combat the region's drug cartels, which includes one of the military's most advanced nuclear-powered submarines. As we've been tracking here on the PDB, last week the White House ordered the deployment of 3 Aegis-guided missile destroyers to the southern Caribbean waters off the coast of Venezuela, the Samson, the Jason Dunham, and the Gravely. They were subsequently joined by the amphibious ships San Antonio, Iwo Jima, and Fort Lauderdale, which are carrying roughly 4,500 personnel, including a Marine Expeditionary Unit of 2,200 troops trained for rapid crisis response. While the Pentagon has not publicly commented on the naval buildup, 2 U.S. officials told Reuters on Monday that the fleet of warships will be joined next week by the guided missile cruiser USS Lake Erie, as well as the nuclear-powered fast attack submarine, the Newport News. The officials, who spoke anonymously, declined to describe the fleet's exact mission. But according to a report from the Miami Herald, the deployment is designed to combat a wide array of threats posed by transnational gangs and cartels that the Trump administration has formally designated as foreign terrorist organizations. As the PDB faithful will recall, in February, Trump designated Venezuela's Tren del Agua, the TDA, El Salvador's MS-13, and 6 cartels based in Mexico as foreign terrorist organizations. It was a critical step in combating their criminal schemes, as the designation gives U.S. authorities expanded powers to freeze assets, disrupt financing, and pursue cartel leadership with tools traditionally reserved for international counterterrorism operations. The use of some of the U.S. military's most potent naval assets, some of which were previously deployed in the Middle East to combat Iranian proxies like the Houthis, underscores the seriousness with which the Trump administration is taking the cartel threat. The 3 guided missile destroyers, for example, are built to counter simultaneous threats from air, land, and sea. They feature vertical launch systems bristling with long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles, standard missiles for air defense, and rocket-assisted torpedoes used in anti-submarine warfare. Shadowing those vessels, the USS Newport News nuclear-powered submarine is known for its advanced stealth capabilities and is armed with its own arsenal of Tomahawk cruise missiles that can be launched from below the surface, as well as Mk-48 torpedoes, which are specifically designed to sink submarines and high-performance surface ships. The sub also boasts advanced sonar, which could prove invaluable in tracking the ships and makeshift submarines used by the cartels to ferry drugs to American shores. Meanwhile, the 3 amphibious ships carrying the detachment of Marines offers additional options for the Naval Task Force, allowing for the rapid deployment of forces on the ground if ordered. A separate Pentagon source told the Miami Herald on Monday that the White House will likely add more ships to the naval contingent in the coming weeks and months, marking an unprecedented show of force against the region's cartels and their political backers. Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro, who was indicted by the DOJ in 2020 on federal charges of narco-terrorism and conspiracy to import cocaine, is of particular interest for the Trump administration. The White House recently labeled Venezuela's so-called Cartel of the Suns as a specially designated global terrorist entity. The trafficking network is allegedly personally run by Maduro and senior members of his military, and partners with violent groups like Venezuela's TDA and Mexico's Sinaloa cartel to flood American streets with cocaine. The Trump administration is currently offering a $50 million bounty for information leading to Maduro's capture. You just have to hope that his security detail doesn't hear about that bounty. Given the scale of the naval deployment, many observers have been left wondering whether the Trump administration is preparing to overthrow his ruling regime in Caracas. Now, while analysts say the regional buildup is likely more about rattling Maduro's cage, the White House isn't exactly ruling it out. When asked point-blank last week about a possible troop deployment to Venezuela, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was careful not to close the door. In a strategically ambiguous statement, she said President Trump is, quote, prepared to use every element of American power to stop drugs from flooding into our country and to bring those responsible to justice, end quote. Even if the Trump administration's moves are purely to combat drug trafficking, the Maduro regime isn't taking it that way. There's a surprise. Maduro appears concerned about the possibility of a U.S. ground incursion into Venezuela and is mobilizing his military accordingly. As we recently discussed, Maduro has ordered the deployment of more than 4.5 million militia members around the country to assist their armed forces. It probably is worth stressing, though, that these militias are primarily made up of civilian volunteers who have little or no training. On Monday, however, Maduro did mobilize 15,000 military troops to Venezuela's western border with Colombia. Maduro's interior minister said the border force will be supplemented with an unspecified number of boats, aircraft, and drones. Additionally, Maduro said he's already in talks with Colombia's defense ministry about bolstering security reinforcements along their shared border, particularly near their coastal regions where the U.S. naval buildup is occurring. The dictator singled out U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio in a warning to the U.S. on Monday evening, saying, quote, unfortunately, this gentleman, with his madness and extremism, could lead President Donald Trump to the worst possible scenario in Latin America and the Caribbean, end quote. Maduro defiantly added, quote, we will emerge victorious from this situation. I don't know. I think I'll take the opposite side of that bet. All right, coming up next, Trump moves to double Chinese student visas. Twice the students, twice the opportunity for economic espionage. And while Israel's top general urges a Gaza hostage deal before the chance slips away. I'll be right back. This podcast is brought to you in part by Stash. Now, imagine investing without ever picking a single stock. Well, with Stash, the experts handle the hard part for you. Look, Stash isn't just another investing app. It's a registered investment advisor that combines automated investing with expert guidance, so you don't have to worry about figuring it out on your own. Choose from personalized investments, or let Stash's award-winning Smart Portfolio do the work for you. With Stash, investing doesn't feel like gambling. It's simple, it's smart, and stress-free, so your money can finally start working as hard as you do. Get access to world-class financial advice with personalized guidance for just, get this, $3 a month. Stash has already helped millions of Americans reach their financial goals, so don't let your money sit around. Put it to work with Stash. Go to get.stash.com/PDB to see how you can receive $25 towards your first stock purchase and a few important disclosures. That's get.stash.com/PDB. This is a paid non-client endorsement. It's not representative of all clients and not a guarantee. Investment advisory services are offered by Stash Investments, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Investing involves risk. Offer is subject to terms and conditions. Welcome back to the PDB. I want to turn now to America's always delicate diplomatic dance with China, as President Trump announces a controversial new initiative to vastly expand access to American universities for Chinese nationals. Now, speaking at the White House on Monday, Trump said he would allow some 600,000 Chinese students to enter the country, which would more than double the current figure of roughly 270,000 Chinese students that are enrolled at U.S. colleges. Trump did not offer much elaboration on his thinking, in his initial remarks anyway, but observers said it signaled a potential thaw in relations with Beijing amid ongoing trade negotiations. That's according to a report from the South China Morning Post. The president made the announcement less than a week after Beijing's foreign ministry criticized the treatment of Chinese students in America, who they say have been, quote, unjustifiably questioned and harassed in recent months. While Trump didn't address that criticism directly, He stressed Monday that his administration is going to, quote, get along good with China, and reiterated that Chinese President Xi Jinping has invited him to come to China for a state visit. Regarding opening America's floodgates to Chinese students, Trump told the press, quote, I hear so many stories that we're not going to allow their students to come in. We're going to allow their students to come in. It's very important. 600,000 students. It's very important. We're going to get along with China, end quote. It's a significant shift in tone from the White House, and one that has much of Trump's base fired up. As recently as May, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the administration would be cracking down on visas for Chinese nationals, specifically those for young college students. At the time, Rubio said there were grave concerns about the ties that many of these students have to the Communist Chinese Party, the CCP, particularly those studying in critical technological and scientific fields that could offer Beijing an economic and military edge. There are also ongoing concerns that some of these students essentially function as spies for the CCP, gleaning insights into advanced areas of research and development at U.S. universities, and then, of course, passing that knowledge back to the communist regime. Now, those concerns are not wrong. Obviously, not every Chinese student is a spy. That should go without saying. But it is a fact that the CCP and the Chinese intel apparatus have used and continue to use the academic arena aggressively to gather valuable intelligence, research and development, economic intelligence, scientific data. So just by upping the number of visas allowed, even if your intentions are good, well, you've upped the opportunities for Chinese intel. As we covered on the PDB back in June, the Department of Justice charged 3 Chinese nationals, including 2 that were studying at the University of Michigan, for attempting to smuggle potentially dangerous biological materials into the U.S. 2 of the Chinese nationals, including an alleged Communist Party loyalist that worked at an agricultural lab at the University of Michigan, were accused of trafficking a dangerous crop-killing pathogen described as a potential agro-terrorism weapon. In the other case, a female Chinese doctoral student at a science and technology university in Wuhan, China, allegedly sent 4 shipments from China containing concealed biological material to staff members at the University of Michigan laboratory. She reportedly planned to spend a year at the University of Michigan completing a project. In both cases, the motivations and research plans of the Chinese nationals remain somewhat shrouded in mystery. But at the time, U.S. Attorney Jerome Gorgon warned it was part of a, quote, alarming pattern that threatens our security. He added that the American taxpayer should not be underwriting a China-based smuggling operation, quote, at one of our crucial public institutions. Well, he's not wrong. Meanwhile, the backlash to Trump's statement from his base, well, has been swift. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene said such an influx of Chinese students would steal opportunities from American students, while former Trump advisor Steve Bannon slammed the decision as, quote, mind-bendingly ridiculous, end quote. I wonder how he actually feels. But Trump defended his position during a cabinet meeting on Tuesday, arguing that foreign students from China were needed to help keep the American university system in business. He stressed, however, that all prospective students would be subject to a thorough security screening process. Trump stated, quote, I like that other countries' students come here. And you know what would happen if they didn't? Our college system would go to hell very quickly, end quote. So it appears that Trump is prepared to dig in his heels on this issue, setting up what could turn into a highly divisive fight within the Republican Party. The Chinese intel apparatus, of course, will be watching that fight closely. Okay, turning to the Israel-Hamas war, the IDF chief of staff says a hostage deal now on the table should be accepted, a call that squarely collides head-on with Prime Minister Netanyahu's insistence on dismissing the proposal as irrelevant, demanding nothing less than total victory. Speaking this week at the Haifa naval base, Israel's top general, Eyal Zamir, declared that the Army's Gideon Chariots operation has achieved its objective close enough in Gaza to uproot Hamas from the enclave. According to his associates, Zamir was blunt, stating, quote, there's a deal on the table. It's the improved Witkoff framework, citing the U.S. brokered plan advanced by Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff earlier this year. In official remarks, the military chief said the IDF's pressure campaign had now, quote, created the conditions for the release of the hostages. But behind closed doors, Israel's Channel 13 reports Zamir outright warns that pushing ahead with the IDF's planned seizure of Gaza City risks, quote, great danger to the roughly 20 hostages still believed alive among the 50 captives remaining in the Strip. That warning is not alone. Retired Army generals, opposition lawmakers, and families of slain hostages have all echoed the concern, warning that Hamas could execute prisoners if Israel charges into the city, as the terror group has done before. But Netanyahu's circle isn't budging. Senior officials told news outlet Channel 12 that Jerusalem has, quote, moved on from Witkoff's framework involving phased hostage releases, temporary ceasefires, and an increase in aid into the enclave. All of this even after Hamas announced last week that it had supposedly accepted the Witkoff plan, a sharp reversal after months of rejection. One Israeli official was categorical, stating, quote, the coming agreements with Hamas will only be for all hostages and an end to the war on conditions that Israel is willing to accept, end quote. Netanyahu insists that only a comprehensive deal, one that secures the release of all hostages, living and dead, and pairs it with Hamas disarmament, Gaza's full demilitarization, and the rise of a new governing authority in the Strip, will do. Despite the looming offensive, negotiations are expected to resume soon, though details remain murky. As we've covered here before on the PDB, talks have collapsed repeatedly, the most recent in Doha last month, when Hamas balked at Israel's terms and the delegation returned empty-handed. Mossad director David Barnea, who played a central role in earlier rounds, may rejoin the negotiating team, though it's unclear if Netanyahu will shuffle his lineup after Doha. What is clear is his coalition's directive: pursue nothing short of a comprehensive deal that ties the release of all hostages directly to the end of the war on Israel's terms. Meanwhile, preparations for the Gaza City offensive roll on. As we discussed last week, tens of thousands of IDF reservists have been called up, with the operation likely to begin in September. And, well, don't expect negotiations to slow it. As one Netanyahu official bluntly told Channel 12, quote, the talks will not stop the offensive. Rather, the opposite. The offensive will accelerate the talks. The Hostages and Missing Families Forum seized on Zamir's warning, declaring, quote, the IDF chief of staff is saying what the majority of the nation's demanding: a comprehensive deal for the return of the 50 hostages and an end to the war. They warned Netanyahu he had, quote, no mandate to the sacrifice of the hostages. So what we're left with is a widening rift. Military leaders and the public urging caution to avoid endangering hostages, and political leadership barreling toward Gaza City with little signs of hesitation, with still no ceasefire in sight, and Hamas still operational. Okay, coming up next in the back of the brief, D.C.'s rare 2-week streak without a killing ends, as President Trump calls for the death penalty for murderers in the D.C. Capitol. More on that story when we come back. Hey, Mike Baker here. Let me take a moment of your time to talk about your personal finances. Now, if, like many folks, you've been living occasionally on credit cards just to cover a variety of expenses, and you know what I'm talking about there, groceries and gas and auto bills and utility bills, well, you know that those interest rates are brutal. So why keep paying 20% or more to the banks? It's a good question. You could call my friends at American Financing instead. With mortgage rates in the 5 and 6% range, they're showing people every day how to keep more of the hard-earned money in their pockets and out of the hands of credit card companies. Right now, American Financing is helping homeowners save an average of $800 a month by using their home equity to wipe out high-interest debt. With no upfront fees, and that's important, no obligation, and just a 10-minute call to a salary-based mortgage consultant. And think about this. If you start today, well, you could delay 2 mortgage payments, putting even more cash in your hands right away. Don't wait. Give American Financing a call. The number, 866-885-1881. That's 866-885-1881. Or visit americanfinancing.net/PDB. In today's back of the brief, President Trump's decision to federalize Washington, D.C.'s police force delivered a milestone that not many mayors could ever claim: 12 straight days without a homicide before the streak broke in the early hours of Tuesday morning. For a capital long scarred by one of the nation's highest murder rates, the results, well, were striking. The lull began on the 13th of August, just 2 days after Trump seized control of the Metropolitan Police Department and reinforced the district with National Guard troops. For nearly 2 weeks, the nation's capital went silent with no recorded killings until shortly after midnight on Tuesday. That killing snapped a run that Trump's allies seized on as proof that his hardline measures are working. Vice President J.D. Vance pointed to D.C.'s historic average of one homicide every other day, arguing that, quote, in 2 short weeks, the president and his team have saved 6 or 7 lives. And the data backs him up. According to the D.C. Police Union, overall crime fell 11% since the federal takeover began. Robberies plunged 42%, assaults with deadly weapons dropped 13%, carjackings collapsed by 85%, and violent crime overall sank by 25%. Police report more than 1,000 arrests and over 100 illegal guns seized so far, just halfway through the 30-day crackdown. Trump has since framed the campaign as a model to be exported nationwide. From the Oval Office, he said, quote, people in Chicago are screaming for us to come. So I think Chicago will be our next stop, and then we'll help New York, end quote. And yesterday's murder only stiffened his resolve. Speaking at his 7th cabinet meeting of his second term, the commander-in-chief announced he signed an executive order to seek the death penalty for homicide cases in the nation's capital. Trump said, quote, if somebody kills somebody in the Capitol, we're going to be seeking the death penalty. That's a very strong preventative. I don't know if we're ready for it in this country, but we have no choice, end quote. For background, capital punishment in Washington was nullified by the Supreme Court in 1972, then formally repealed by the D.C. Council in 1981, with residents voting against reinstatement in a 1992 referendum. But Trump, who oversaw a record 13 federal executions in the final 6 months of his first term, insists his Justice Department is prepared to reintroduce it in the district as part of his sweeping anti-crime agenda. So while the streak is over, Trump's push is not. As far as the White House is concerned, 12 murder-free days in D.C. showed that reestablishing order is possible in America's capital. And that, my friends, is the President's Daily Brief for Wednesday, the 27th of August. Now, if you have any questions or comments, and I hope you do, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. And to listen to the show ad-free, you can do that, Become a premium member of the President's Daily Brief by visiting pdbpremium.com. I'm Mike Baker, and I'll be back later today with the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. Until then, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment, a really positive, nice, and kind comment. That would be appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our daily updates.